Start, Marcus. So, welcome all to this NCCC general meeting, which is will be followed by the AGM. And I'm really grateful for your consistent engagement with NCCC, and would like to introduce Caroline le Couteur, who we invited to let us know her thoughts on how to improve consultation and planning. The problem I see is that a large amount of NCCC activities are concerned with major developments that are happening across northern Canberra, and I will talk about some of them later. And the question is, while I think everybody agrees that stuff needs to happen and the city needs to develop, there are some chronic issues that we are constantly tackling, and in brief, they have to do with the way consultation is being conducted, the fact that we rarely have a say in alternatives to certain developments. We have repeated issues with compliance, and we have repeatedly issues with the degree to which developments contribute to the common goods. And so we know that there is a major review of planning in progress at the moment. It's very high level strategic at this stage, and very little can be shared, which we have so far seen of that process. But that will be coming very soon, that we will have input into that major planning review. So I'd like to hand over to Caroline to give us her thoughts on, because she has been very active as the member of the Assembly in the last 4 years to think about planning issues. So it would be very interesting for us to hear her thoughts. So Caroline.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Come on. Share. Aha. Now we need to click on from the beginning and go back one. Right. Okay. Thank you to Joachim and NCCC for inviting me. I hope I have something useful to say after I've had 2 terms in the Assembly, both terms being the Greens planning spokesperson. And the last term I was the chair of the Planning Committee. Now I should make it abundantly clear, I am not speaking on behalf of the Greens. I am a member of the public now. I'm still a member of the Greens, but I'm not in any way a spokesperson for the Greens. However, you do have a spokesperson. You in fact have a Greens minister on this call, Rebecca Vazzarotti, who has ministerial responsibilities for some of the parts of planning and consultation, although I must admit I can't quite work out exactly where the responsibilities start and end, but yes. And the other people, of course, I should pay my respects to are the First Nations inhabitants of the land on which we live and plan and build, and note that they are very seldom, if ever, consulted about what happens planning-wise in Canberra. Now, I decided, main reason I decided to actually do a PowerPoint presentation was because the first couple of them, being someone who's gotten interested in planning, they're pretty pictures. I'm sure we all know this one. It's Walter Burley Griffin's original plan for Canberra. That was only for a fairly small part of Canberra. Yarralumla was about the end of the known universe then. So we have the NCCC's Y plan, which basically as a Y saw the branched bits of the way, potentially extending well into New South Wales, you know, sort of basically forever. Interesting things about these two plans is, of course, they were done without any community consultation, because basically the community basically wasn't there to be consulted in the first plan. And the second plan, of course, we were still ruled by the hopefully benevolent dictatorship of the federal government. Now, the last plan, this is the current 2018 ACT strategic plan, on which there has been quite a bit of consultation, although I think most of us who were consulted hadn't any idea this is what we were ending up, what our consultations might have gone into. And I suppose the most interesting thing is, instead of going north, we're going east-west. But all of this talk about planning implies something. You can't plan unless you have some objective and in mind. And I think that's the first part of which planning often doesn't work in Canberra or anywhere else. Seeing as how I'm a green and I did a year of ecology at uni, I'm going to put my one little deep green bit in here. Everybody wants a sustainable outcome, because a sustainable outcome is one that you can keep on having. If you can't keep on having, if it's not sustainable, you're not going to be able to keep on having that good outcome. And the ecological equation is the environmental impact is population times affluence times technology. So the more the population and the more the affluence, the more environmental impact. And technology can go plus or minus, like in the ACT, we've moved to renewable electricity, and that's reduced our environmental impact compared to coal. But so I guess what I'm pointing out here is we all basically say we want sustainability, but exactly what we mean by that and how we might achieve it is, to put it mildly, a very debatable topic. The population growth, rapid population growth, has been one of the features of ACT planning in the last few years. And I think it's one of the things that's caused a considerable amount of the angst in the community. And I'm not sure that it's something that we agreed to, or that's something we can stop. Anyway, ask me questions if you want more on that. Getting down to smaller things, we have a heap of things, all of which can be found in some government things, lots of community stuff, and I certainly don't think we're managing to do all of them, but the Greens and all three parties in the election supported more trees and more green space. As I said, the First Nations people arguably are still the owners of Canberra, because there was no treaty, sovereignty was never ceded. Whatever legal status you think they are not getting recognition for it. And construction, housing all of us, is got to be one of the major aims of construction and planning anywhere. And we have the least affordable rental housing in Australia. It'd be nice if we had a place that had arts and culture. If you remember back in the distant past, there was 1% of big projects had to go into public art. Clearly, we need something that is age-friendly, that older people and younger people can move around, and people with disabilities and whole families can move around. I think we're all acknowledging now that climate change is an issue. A lot of our emissions are based on the built environment, either the building of the environment or the operations of it. How does our planning address that? Do we have town centres that are viable, independent entities, or should be everything exciting apart? Should that all happen in civic? I mean, this is an ongoing debate, and the NCCC's Y plan was very much town centred. The current developments with the CRA are much more civic centred. And then we have the concept of a 20-minute city, which is in our 2008, or was it 30-minute? So I might be 30-minute. It was in our 2018 strategic plan. So we've got lots and lots of objectives, but we don't seem to have any community consensus as to how they should be ranked, because we're not going to have them all, I don't think. Well, and we certainly aren't. And if you don't know where you're trying to go, then your chances of getting there are low. And the other thing I would really like to say for both planning and consultation, it all takes a lot of work. Now, I think probably the most major reason why we have such a poor planning and consultation in the ACT and everywhere is that we actually just don't put enough resources into the front end of planning. If we don't get the front end right, it's left to the community to try and look at the back end and try and make it a bit better. And we are not putting the resources into the front end planning in terms of getting the community the community to agree where we're trying to go. There may be a few people apart from myself who remember the early neighbourhood planning in I can't see, as I'm sharing my screen, I can only see 3 people, but yeah, I remember those. I was on the steering group for Downer, of all things representing business, if we need to put sort of resources like that, I think, into our planning again, if we are going to get community consensus, because a lot of community consensus happened then, which has eroded. But that's not just the community's resources. A hell of a lot of it has to be put in by government and developers. The community cannot do it by itself. Now, this is going to have a few slides about what I think consultation sort of has to have and generally doesn't have. I mean, logically, from a planning point of view, we first should be consulting about the big picture, the plans, what are the objectives, where are we going to have whatever we're going to have. And then we get consulted about how they're implemented. But if we don't work out where we're going first, then there's a good chance that we're not going to be in agreement about the implementation. And in other words, you could say we should, we first consult on the territory plan, the various codes, the precinct plans, all of those, and then we get down to the DA stage, which unfortunately for most members of the public, that's the first time they get involved in planning at all, because it's the first time that, they notice that something is happening and it's big and they didn't know anything about it and they don't like it. The other thing is that planning and construction needs to be long-term for stability. Even your not particularly well-built single house is designed for at least a 50-year lifespan. And you've got to hope that some of the towers, which have a hell of a lot of embodied energy and will be incredibly hard to demolish, are designed for an even longer lifespan than that. Although based on the issues we have with them, it's not clear that that is the case. So there are huge long lifespans, at least 50 years in most things, which means you're asking people to give their opinions, do consultation and plannings for things that they're not going to be around for. That was, look at the new area of Molonglo. I was involved in the consultations for that back, in 2009, 2010, 11, 12. You couldn't consult with the relevant community. There was nobody. There was seriously nobody living there. How do we do our consultation? How do we get the relevant people involved? How do we get people interested in something that won't happen in their community for 5-10 years' time? Jane Gothman is one of the people I can actually see in this. And so in saying that, I think about Section 72. I can remember going to Section 72 consultations before I was first elected to the Assembly. And it's still not, this is an ongoing saga. Same thing happened with Downer School site. That was got to be over. That's probably at least a 20-year consultation period in that. That doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for the community. It doesn't work for the proponent of the development, and it doesn't work for ACPLA, who's trying to provide the limited professional support to this. One of the things I think that's most important for consultation is there has to be a commitment that the results of it are going to be used, because otherwise everyone concerned, and I think they would have to include the professional paid ACPLA and the developers, as well as the community, just gets pissed off and doesn't take it seriously. Like I was talking about the 20 years worth of the Downer School site. Yeah, we did some good work on, I can remember the first plans, there were all these wonderful north-facing buildings. I doubt, and I've talked to some developers about one particular development that started off in my first term in the Assembly, and then the actual developers were in my second term. And I remember asking them, there was a lot of community consultation on the territory plan variation, and they told me they did not see any of it. It's not that they ignored it, they couldn't access it. So yeah, commitment to use results, fairly number one. And then another one is support for the participants recognises the substantial power imbalances. A member of the community versus ACPLA, or a member of the community versus Geocon. We're not starting from the same place, and there needs to be some recognition of this. The other thing that there seriously needs to be recognition of is that not everybody is going to get what they want. Some things like solar access is kind of a zero-sum game. There's a certain amount of sun that's going to fall on the ACT, fall on Downer, fall on Dixon, and we can divvy up who gets it. But that's the best we can do. And different entities have different rights. And under our capitalist system, which possibly we should change, but that's getting a bit broad for this conversation. Under our capitalist system, the owners, even leasehold owners of land, are given certain rights. They may or may not have been given those rights, but in terms of the planning system, that's one of the real constraints, because you quite often see the situation where it's pretty clear that 10 years later, nobody would have agreed to what happened, but the rights were given to someone in the past. The other thing that is really important is that the relevant information is provided. We spend all our time talking about traffic studies. Why are there no traffic studies? And why did this traffic study not include all the developments? Why did it only include whatever? Shadow diagrams. And the relevant entities have to be involved. Like I was talking about in Molonglo, it's hard to find those relevant entities. They didn't know who they were at the time. But it has to not just be the people who can join NCCC, the people who can join on currently are now on the Committee of Woden Community Council. It needs to include a lot more young people. It needs to somehow people have to get to know about the consultations that are relevant to them. And I do acknowledge the ACT government has actually done a fair bit of work on this from trying to bring things more online, but it's still something that isn't working very well. I'll just talk about a couple of the improvements, or possible improvements, haven't actually really happened in the last term of the Assembly. One of the things in the Parliamentary Agreement between the Greens and the Labor Party was more deliberative democracy. And one of the things that happened partly as a result of that was the Housing Choices program. I assume someone from NCCC was involved with that. I got to go to some of the sessions as an observer, and I'd have to say that they provided a hell of a lot of very useful information, and the report that was produced at the end was, while I wouldn't personally agree with every single bit of it, was certainly a very useful report, and it would have, I think we would have gone, it would have been great if it had been implemented, but it may turn up somewhere in the Territory Plan Review, but right now it's, to the best of my knowledge, nowhere. The other one was the demonstration housing, which was a motion of mine. It was something that has been pushed by the Institute of Architects for a decade or two. The idea being that you don't know if you're going to like something until you've actually been able to see it, and that we could have a few experiments of different ways of building things. There have been a number of people who've put in plans and put a hell of a lot of work onto it, and as yet, no territory plan variations or DAs have been released. So I feel somewhat embarrassed about that, but I'm hopeful that it will still continue and that we'll get some good results. Slightly more radical, people keep on calling the ACT Legislative Assembly the local council. We're not a local council, but maybe from a planning point of view that it's not it's possibly something that's worth considering. We do it everywhere else in Australia, and we could do as was done in Sydney. Say population's going to grow by what, 10, 20, 30,000 each area. That's yours to deal with. It's not actually what I'm proposing. What I would propose as a solution, but it's certainly something that has been thought about. Now, I'm no longer in the Assembly because there's been an election. Because there's been an election where there were 6 Green MLAs elected, there is a new parliamentary and governing agreement, and that has a hell of a lot in it about planning. I contemplated putting it all in these slides, but I decided that it was so small as to be unreadable, and that really what I would do is put the link to it, and actually after I've stopped sharing my screen, I'll put the link in the chat box as well. But if you don't hit that link, search for the ACT Greens, then you look in the top heading for ACT Assembly, and under that it's got a link to the Parliamentary and Governing Agreement. I'll just mention a couple, the first 2, because they're really concrete, and that's why I'm more enthusiastic about them, because there's a fair chance that you know what they'll actually happen with a defined result. The Planning Committee did do a report on the DA system with about 60 recommendations. It will not fix any of the big problems about what the objectives of planning are in the ACT. It's at the DA level, but it will improve the information and consultation if it is all implemented. And one of the simple things, for instance, is if this was implemented, then ACTPA would be able to say about a DA, look, you're just making, does not have the correct information in it. Go away and do it better. Instead of at present, it's left to the people like the Stolitz of NCCC to work out that, yeah, no, this just doesn't actually make sense. You've decided your building, in fact, is a couple of metres in the next door block or whatever. ACTPA should be able to just say, no, go home, do better. The other thing that the agreement says is community control planning support. This in my envisaging of it, and of course I don't know exactly how it will turn out, is someone with planning expertise under the control of the community, which I assume is probably going to be the community councils, combined community councils, but I don't know. Giving support to the community so that people in the community do not all have to try and become planning experts when it's as you all know, the territory plan is yay high. It's more than a foot high printed out. It's incomprehensible. It's written in English, but that's about all you can say for it in terms of being comprehensible. And yeah, I think that's as far as my slides went. It is as far as my slides went. So I'm really happy to answer any questions, or possibly we should have a more widespread discussion. I'll just, well, I'll stop share now. Right. Okay. Any questions?
Thanks heaps, Caroline. It makes us look like garden dwarfs running around and at the bottom end of the whole process. But it's very much appreciated. If I could just kick off with a couple of questions. I mean, one of the problems we face is that we are always confronted with piecemeal solutions, and the example is section 72, where little bits are being decided upon without a discussion about the wider context. And the second problem is that we are confronted with one solution, not a design competition. What could you do with a place? Alternative ways of developing this site, for instance, rather than just being confronted with one solution and then being able to fiddle around the edges.
Those are excellent points. And in terms of the design competition there is an awful lot about planning in the Parliamentary Agreement, and one of them is that at least one development a year will be sold to be a showcase development where part of the criteria is going to be that you actually have a really good design. And I think it'd be great if we do more of that. So that, if it is implemented, will not solve Section 72's problems, but might solve someone else's problems.
Yeah.
In terms of Section 72, one thing I forgot to say is that, as far as I can see, it's comparatively easy to do greenfields planning. You know, the early plans with the Walter Berry Griffin's plan and then the Y plan were effectively greenfields. No one was living on the places and nothing had been built. Section 72 and lots of other parts of Canberra aren't like that anymore. So there has been one round of development, and in many cases, and I suppose I'm thinking here particularly of Woden, not so much the 72, in many cases the land has already been sold to a variety of private enterprises, all of whom have various goals, and one of which is to maybe not to maximise their profits, but at least to do well out of it, if you know what I mean. I mean, some developers probably don't maximise their profits. Where you've got situations where you've got, 5 different owners of a area like Section 72, all with different aims, different time spans, it's really hard to draw. You can draw a plan, but then ACPLA's only real levers that it's got is to rezone things. And there's no point in ACPLA rezoning things so that it gives the developer less development opportunities, because if they do that, then the developer is highly unlikely to take it up. So kind of by definition, these tend to be redevelopments with more density on them, because that's the way that ACPLA can encourage more development. The only other option the government has got is to actually buy the block of land or effectively pay the current owner to develop something which is less than they could. And the government has shown a marked reluctance to ever do that. I mean, I'm not aware that it actually has ever done that anywhere in the ACT. One of the examples where they probably should do something is in Molonglo. There's a shopping centre there. It only has one shop open, and it was meant to have a supermarket. It's less than a tenth of it is occupied, and it just sits there. The only real solution probably is either the developer goes bust, which seems unlikely, or I don't know, ACT government buying them out, but which the ACT government has looked at, but they want too much money for it. Yeah, so redevelopment is much harder than greenfields, as far as I can see.
No, and another thing, just briefly, I had a long conversation with architectural students from Canberra University who had an assignment on consultation. And they had knowledge of a way of dealing with contributions to the common good from Newcastle. I don't know whether that is England Newcastle or Australian Newcastle, where a certain percentage of a development has to show and demonstrate that it gives back to the environment, in the social environment it happens in.
We could do that in the ACT. The theory in the ACT, which doesn't work that well, is that your least variation charge is meant to do that, because the least variation charge is meant to charge the developer for the extra rights, extra profit they're going to get, and take a proportion of that and give it to the community so that they can benefit from it. But it doesn't seem to be working particularly well, and particularly as it tends to focus very much on extra residential development, and it doesn't do much in terms of traffic. But yeah, that and the government also, we have got a leasehold situation, so sort of theoretically you can, that's why we call it a lease variation charge, that we would do it if the lease varied. I think it's something that we have to do a lot more work in, and certainly in my time in the Assembly, the lease variation charge has been one of the most contentious issues between the government and the developers and the property council. Yeah, it should be a work in progress. I don't know if it is. Oh, and I've put the link to the governing agreement in the chats.
Thanks heaps. Any questions?
I'm happy to ask a question if nobody else is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Caroline. That was actually a really good, comprehensive discussion about planning in the ACT. So thanks for that. Lots of questions I could ask, but this whole question of consultation, the point you made about are we consulting with the right people? Because, you know, in a way, a lot of the consultation happens with the existing residents when in fact, as you say, perhaps the people we should be consulting are the ones who are currently like in high school, the ones who actually buy into these places in the future. I know I have a debate with my son about planning actually, because he has quite a different view about planning. He's in his 20s and he actually really likes being in a small apartment. Like that's just his lifestyle. It suits him. And the idea of actually living on a big block, you know, in somewhere like the inner north just doesn't appeal to him at all. So I just wonder how do you balance those sorts of different views about people's, you know, lifestyles, different demographics and things like that in doing that consultation, coming up with a plan that will actually be sustainable?
Well, to quite an extent, that's why you have people called politicians, because you know, seriously, everybody's got their own views. They're not all compatible. And at some point, it is kind of a political decision. Do we, you know, I've heard heaps of people saying what you said about younger people wanting to live in small apartments. And I spent a couple of years living in an apartment in Woden before moving where I am now. And there's certainly a lot of people there who the last thing they would have wanted was a garden. There's equally a lot of people, and probably the demographic here has more of people who, you know, I certainly want a garden. Major reason we moved was because I wanted a garden. Look, okay, I suppose a bit, apart from just saying politicians, the other part of the answer is that I think it should be the job of the professional planners to look at, okay, if we do this, if we build in largely small apartments, what impact will that have in 5, 10, 15 years? Is it going to be that people in your son are happy right now, but then in 5 years' time when he wants to have kids or his peers want to have kids, they find that the Canberra that's been built doesn't have space for the kids? We need demographers, we need planners, we need to work out if we build X, Y, or Z, it will have impacts. You can't expect the community to work that all out. This is what I was talking about. Relevant information is needed. The planners need to be able to help us and say, these are the scenarios. If we build all one-bedroom apartments, we'll have a great university population and they'll all go and live in Googong once they settle down with kids or whatever. But there's no easy answer, I think. I think there's a question from Max Power. I think you're possibly wrong about 95% of the planning influence, but yeah, you're certainly not wrong about the general point. There is a huge power imbalance between individuals and developers and ACPLA. I mean, I'd have to put ACPLA in. It's not just the developers. And part of the issue, like Geocom employs a few hundred people, and they're not the people who are actually doing all the work on the sites, because those are subcontractors. The big developers, they have an awful lot of firepower as well, and they often have more firepower than ACPLA in a particular instance. Now, they've got, yes, we don't have a fair situation from that point of view. And I suppose, you know, the usual political things, talk to your local MLAs. You've got one here this evening, Rebecca, as well as being a minister, is one of your local Green MLAs. And I'm sure that while she may not always have time herself, she does have staff, and she is concerned about good planning in a north. You know, talk to your neighbours. If a bunch of you disagree, petitions are often incredibly useful. You usually don't get exactly what you want, but you often get something that isn't as bad as what was first proposed. Community power, it takes a lot of work, but it can make a difference. And if you want someone to talk on that subject, Jane Goffman could probably spend a couple of days on that subject, but you have got experts amongst your midst here. And yes, it is, but it's not an equal fight, I have to agree.
Is there, Neil, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Thanks, Caroline. Caroline, it was disappointing to hear that the community consultation that went over 5 Saturdays doesn't seem to be having any impact. I particularly feel that way because I was one of the people who spent that time there. The impression I got was a bit like what you were saying with GeoCon out gunning ACPLA. It seems to me that there isn't enough planning people on this area in ACPLA to even begin to come up with good planning before developments happen, or to improve the developments. The people who we were talking to just seemed really overworked and overwhelmed on something that's very complicated. And I think what happens is what happened along Bourne Avenue. Half the buildings seem to have got built before the consultations began. It seemed backwards. You know, we should have been building north-facing stuff instead of west-facing stuff, and it didn't happen. The NCA did have a good go at planning for better buildings on the sites just north of Hague Park, but the types that they wanted didn't suit the developers. That the developers weren't willing to pay the higher prices, and so that good planning could take place. I don't know what the answer is there, other than I think the government should take a little less money for those sites if it means that they can get north-facing and better designed buildings in North Bourne Avenue, which will be there for a long time. Sorry.
Look, I largely agree with you, Neil, and certainly I think one of the major problems is ACPLA needs more resources at the back end, not so much at the DA side, because there's enough developer pressure that the DA side has some resources, but the planning behind, the strategic planning behind is, you know, I think chronically under-resourced. And I've often felt that maybe we should actually just get rid of virtually all the building codes and just say to every builder, you have to have a compass. It has to face north. And apart from that, we'd like you to make sure that you're at least 10 foot in from the boundaries everywhere, or whatever, you know, a distance in from the boundaries. And yeah, I largely agree with what you're saying, Neil.
Jane.
I could obviously ask a lot of questions, but I'm not going to do that. What I will ask is, what do you believe we can effectively do to get a good planning minister?
I think you're going to have well, look, I don't quite know what to say. Because obviously I do know who the planning minister is, and to some extent I should say I refer you to my valedictory speech for my views on the current achievements of the current and previous planning minister. I have no idea you know, given the sentiments I expressed about the waste of 4 years in planning, I have no idea how you do that. There are presumably some factional deals within the Labor Party as to why they make give ministries out that they do. Presumably it's also the Labor Party's quite happy to have 4 years wasted. Jane, I don't, you know, I wish I knew, but you know, the waste of the last 4 years was, you know, one of the many issues that meant that I didn't bother standing again, because it's horrible. It was a waste, I think, from a planning point of view, and we could have done so much better.
Yeah.
Rebecca.
Hi. Oh, sorry, I've just turned off my video. Hi, look, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, because I think the comments that Caroline make are really well placed. In relation to some of the comments that Neil makes, I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, Caroline has really highlighted is the fact that part of our challenge is that the whole planning system is really proponent driven. And so it's really about responding to proponent proposals. And so, you know, certainly in terms of the parliamentary and governing agreement that we've negotiated as part of this term, we've really tried to pick up some of those issues. And, you know, there's one initiative that is sort of identified in that first appendix that really looks at, particular for big sites, about how we actually identify what some of the outcomes are that are beyond getting the maximum profit. So really identifying some of those community outcomes, some of the environmental outcomes and social outcomes that we want out of a site, and really building that into the process. So that's absolutely something that in this term of government we really, you know, are committed to doing. You know, we don't have direct responsibility for planning outcomes in relation to our ministerial responsibilities at the moment, but we do have, you know, some significant responsibilities in relation to building sustainability and quality. And I think that's a really good inroad for us to really try to push the ACT really doing much better in terms of the kinds of buildings that we are developing. And that's, you know, that sits within my ministerial portfolio and something that I'm really passionate about in terms of how we, you know, sort of really protect our heritage, as well as really responding to some of the intergenerational issues that Gordon highlighted as well. Again, is something that, you know, in relation to my ministerial portfolio, I'm really interested in exploring. So, you know, I have some, I really understand, and Caroline did such hard work over the last 4 years and has built such an, you know, we've got such an incredible platform to really look at what some of the issues are. But, you know, I have some optimism in relation to what we can do. I think, you know, look, I know that the planning review has been a very slow process, but I do have some optimism that through the planning review that there might be some real, you know, opportunities to reform the system. And, you know, look, you know, we're you know, 3 weeks into the job, 2 weeks into the ministerial portfolios, but we are absolutely committed to seeing how we can ensure that meaningful community engagement is part of the process. And so, you know, we're not going to change it all in a couple of months, but it's certainly where we're really coming from in terms of really understanding the frustration and, you know, recognising the frustrations of community and really believing that, you know, there's things that we can do to make it a lot better than it is now.
Just one last thought, because we slowly need to move into our AGM to this discussion, and that follows on from demonstration housing, from what Caroline was saying. I think it may be worthwhile checking internationally for examples where large developments of housing were developed with future tenants together. And that means, although stuff wants to happen fast in Canberra at the moment, it may be worthwhile, at least in certain cases, to slow the whole process a bit down and showcase how things would work and what the outcomes would be if you involve future community in the design, planning, and building process.
No, absolutely. You don't have to go overseas for that, though. I'm particularly thinking of the development in Melbourne, a low-income co-housing development, whose name I'll not be able to pronounce correctly. Morinda. Gordon might be able to help me with that, but they've got about 30 medium-density units, and yeah, they took quite a long time to develop it. Kevin Rudd, if you remember the GFC, and he was giving out money to build lots of social and affordable housing. They did it all with their community. But you're totally right, Joachim, and we can do it. And we have made some positive changes. Now there is, in some ways, more consultation than there was. I was thinking, well, Becca was talking that in the 7th Assembly we made a couple of changes, pre-DA consultation, and also you used to be able to just demolish the house next door without any notification to your neighbours at all. They still can't do anything much, but at least they'll know that the house next door is going to be demolished instead of coming home and finding, oh, they used to have next door neighbours. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, now hang on, Brooke.
Brooke.
Joachim, I just wanted to say Sea Change have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, which is people from property collectives down in Melbourne, and it's all about citizen-led housing. So there'll be some examples highlighted there of some small scale, but interesting sustainable development. Okay,
make sure to let Chris Finnegan, our secretary, know about this so that he can distribute that to interested NCCC people.
Okay, I'll message him a link right now.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks heaps, Caroline. I hope this is not the last time we see you. Are you moving back into the north?
That's an excellent question, Joachim, and I'll be very pleased when I know the answer to it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Clapping is a bit weird in Zoom. Right, folks. Chris, what are our next? You had standing items. Oh yeah, most importantly, the confirmation of previous meeting minutes.
Oh, sorry. Out of the way.
Okay. Okay, we accept.
The problem when you're recording live. Yeah, sorry, we'll try and get through these quickly so we can get to the AGM. But yeah. Yes, I think the July minutes would have been sent around with the agenda.
They were very comprehensive and I have no problem accepting them.
Excellent.
Simon is supporting me in this. So I think we can, are there any issues with the July general meeting?
Are we talking about the AGM from last year? Or?
No, the general meeting in July.
All good.
All good? I take these minutes to be accepted.
Excellent.
So now, given that we will have a treasurer's report in the context of the AGM, maybe we can move that to the AGM. Is that okay with you guys? Good. Committee decisions. Have you made any decisions? No. Chris, do you know whether we made any decisions?
I think the last update would have been the funding paper that Bruce, the treasurer, sent around. So perhaps if we want to discuss that in the Treasurer's report in the
Yeah.
AGM item,
Yeah.
but I think that was the list of funding proposals
Yeah, yeah.
would have been the last.
And there in the Treasurer's report, we will also hear about a major decision we had to make in order to get the Treasurer, our annual finances in order. And then the resident association updates will also come after the AGM, I assume. Is that all right? Any other business of the general nature which cannot be accommodated in the AGM? None? Then I suggest we close the general meeting for today and move to the AGM. Thank you. So, welcome to the NCCC's AGM 2020. We will have first presentations of annual reports by the committee, which includes the Treasurer's report first, and then the Chair's report second. Bruce.
Okay, thanks Jochen. Okay, so I've circulated the independent reviewers report today to the committee. There was a bit of there are a couple of issues with that. We had a bit of a glitch with the person who we had lined up to do the report. We had to get a new reviewer in the last week, Peter Nolan, who did an excellent job, who in only a week got himself across our accounts, the online system, and then worked his way through it all and generated the report. What the report found is that the accounts are a fair and true account of the council's financial position. He noted the findings from the previous audits, that there were some issues to do with gaps in receipts and records, and says that the NCCC now has in place an accounting application that allows all receipts and invoices to be uploaded and matched with each bank transaction. This reviewer has had unfettered access to the NCCC bank statements and the software and examined sufficient entries to verify that the system is transparent and true. Appropriate documentation in the way of receipts, invoices, letters of request, and the like are attached to each transaction. So, so basically we got a clean bill of health. The actual results, if I can do a shared screen, Marcus. Yeah, so if I do that, and then okay. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Right, that's the wrong slide. But just here we are. Okay, all right. So there are only 2 slides. It's fairly straightforward. So we had at the beginning of last financial year, we had a surplus of $11,071. We got a grant of $12,821. What isn't showing there is another $10 that we generated, a magisterial $10 in interest. We expended $18,889 during the year, and so at the end of the financial year we had a surplus of $5,013. So that's the very broad picture presented in the reviewer's account. This is the breakdown of the expenditure. As you can see, the majority of it was what we're calling community communication and identity. That's really code for money that we gave to residents associations to do a whole range of stuff that they're doing, basically working with the community on toing and froing, getting views out there, seeking community views, the stuff that we're meant to be doing with the grant, but also generating a sense of community identity, particularly at that sort of suburb level. So we've got websites, Residents Association websites, flyers and brochures, equipment for public events, heritage promotion. We paid for some PR for mutual COVID-19 aid, suburb histories, welcome packs, so a whole range of different things that residents associations have done. In addition, down the bottom right, separated out campaigns to government. That is things that are not so much about communities, but actually quite direct attempts to intervene in government processes. Broadly, there are two things. One is ACAT appeals, and the other is a campaign that was done around the Black Mountain Vista. So 1,700 or so on that. The rest of it's fairly self-explanatory, some sundry admin, insurance, of course, IT, the redesign of the website, management of the website, meeting connectivity. The only one that's a little bit unusual there is the 1,770 for audit and accounts. Normally we wouldn't spend anything like that on that, but that was the situation we found ourselves in, where we had to pay for the audits of the previous 3 years with some of the gaps in records. So we had to pay some money to get auditors to actually retrospectively go through those records. In addition, we're now paying an annual subscription for the accounting software, which enables us to upload all of those receipts. So in a nutshell, that's really the report for last year. I'll just quickly, before I take any questions, just go through where we're up to now. So since the last committee meeting, we've now received the annual grant from the ACT government, the same as last year, $12,800. We've made two payments, one quite substantial, which is we paid the annual insurance, so $1,670. That covers all of the residents associations as well as the operations of the NCCC, except for Downer, which has separate arrangements because they need to have insurance for the community centre there. In addition, there was $53 for the paying for the annual payment for the domain name. So the balance, in fact, I think it's actually for not just the annual payment, it's over some years for the domain name. So the balance as it stands at the moment is $15,116. The committee made a whole series of decisions at its last meeting about a forward budget allocation for that money, and I can forward the details of that on to anyone who wasn't on the committee and would be interested in seeing those breakdowns. But basically, what that does is commit the majority of the money in one form or another to a whole series of either ongoing payments, for IT and so forth, or for specific projects that were proposed by the residents associations. So leaving a remainder of about 1,000 to 2,000. Our record in the past has been that we tend to underspend. So it's quite likely that we'll actually have more money left over than that. And so I would envisage that the committee will probably monitor that expenditure and look at any further proposals or any further measures early to mid next year. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Bruce. It's Neil. I was just wondering what the software is that you're using now to do the accounts with the, and secondly, I think the cost of the audit was very cheap. Well, for 3 years.
The software is Xero Accounting. Yep. It's one of those mega things. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we use about 5% of its capacity. But it's actually well worth it in terms of making sure that we're on all fours, and it makes the actual audit very straightforward because everything is there and it's reconciled in real time with the Westpac bank account. So it's all.
Yeah, you get the bank feeds.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Bruce, one thing just to clarify to everybody, that you also put in a lot of effort to make sure that all the expenditure is legal as per our deed of grant. I remember you specifically talked to the people in Chief Minister's Department about what sort of activities we can spend money on, and you were very careful to vet expenditure in that light.
Yeah, that's right. But it should be noted that the chief ministers have been very good. They're very flexible. They're really keen for the council to be effective, and so they're happy to give us quite a wide area of flexibility in what we're doing. What they don't want is they don't want us to become a kind of mini grant area for completely anomalous things.
Okay.
So they do want it to be broadly in the remit of communication, but they're happy to actually interpret communication and community communication quite broadly.
Okay. Any other questions to the Treasurer's report? Okay, Bruce, can you stop sharing your screen?
I can do that.
So now I'll move to the Chair's report, and want to just acknowledge a number of people that helped us to get back on track with NCCC, and most importantly, Leon Marundell last year kept NCCC going at great personal costs, faced with adversity. And I really want to thank him that he had the guts to take us through there. And then I think a really important step in getting NCCC back into a functioning organization was Paul Costigan's suggestion that we should change our constitution. And I think that change in constitution works extremely well because it now broadens the base of decision-making in NCCC to all representatives of resident associations. And I think that was a very, very positive step. I hope you agree. And then in this weird year of bushfires and hail and viruses and American elections, I think it was wonderful to have a team of people who really coped well with all adversity, and that includes Chris Finnegan, who done a wonderful job as a secretary, including establishing a newsletter that keeps everybody informed about activities within NCCC and upcoming problems and so on and so on. And then Bruce with getting our finances into a really clear and consistent order that makes us unassailable, I think, in future, because it is completely transparent, everything is well documented, and nothing falls through the cracks. And Bruce has also done a huge amount of job to get NCCC finance in order over the last several years where things went astray. And then Marcus, who helped us to Zoom, and we even had what, 75 people Zoom meeting with politicians that turned out to be really successful. And then Andrea, who kept an eye on other issues and topics on the web page and submissions and other statements NCCC put out during the ACT election. So I really thank everybody there, a very, very powerful team. And so what I want to do in the rest of my chair's report is just go through some of the issues we are facing, we have been facing, and we are going to continue to face in the next term. So I'd like to share this screen with you. Can you see that?
Not yet. No, it doesn't seem to be coming up.
No.
Should just be able to click the share screen button at the bottom, and then you got to click the type of screen that you want to share.
And then, okay, now?
That's it, yeah, we're seeing something. It's coming up. Yes, we've got the map of Canberra.
Here I marked on the Google Earth the major projects from West Basin redevelopment in the south to new roads wanting to be built from the federal roundabout, and I'm just going briefly through them. The first issue is that West Basin development, and the initial work is now being conducted in basically building a boardwalk with filling in with this beautifully inspiring landscape design for what is going to happen on the infill. Here is another drawing of it. Apart from, and then NCCC made some submissions to that, and again, the big problem is the piecemeal development. So this is now what's going to happen now, but what we are confronted with are these plans. That the whole area, this is the road over the bridge, and these are existing buildings in the back here, and the whole area wants to be built with buildings. The only really positive thing I see is what I point at with this arrow here, is that they actually want to put that big road underground so that there is a direct link between Civic and the sea, which is currently basically serviced by one little footbridge across that big road. So we will need to keep an eye on what the long-term planning here is, because what we are asked to do is to talk about this. So we need to keep an eye on this. We are in contact with the guy who is in charge of this. I floated our basic concerns already. He's very, very concerned about doing it well. But the general issue is, again, the piecemeal nature of the consultation in this project. So the second thing is the big Duma foothill Campbell project at the foothill of Mount Ainslie, where problems have now arisen with the Aboriginal heritage values of this site. And I haven't heard anything about it in the meantime, but maybe the Campbell people and Reed people can tell us more about this. Then we have suggestions to build a community center in Hague Park, and Chris wanted to talk a bit more about that, so I keep it short. Then a recent lease variation has been put in to develop this site opposite. This is the ABC, this is Wakefield Avenue, this is Northbourne Avenue, and this site, a lease variation from commercial to supportive housing, which in principle I think is really interesting. But we put in a reservation saying we wanted to know more about the long-term plans for that site, because as Jane has indicated quite a while ago, there are serious issues about view lines across Wakefield Avenue to Black Mountain and so on. So we'll need to keep an eye on this. Then Marcus has been involved in a development application by the Ainslie Football Club, who basically want to have a big new entry into their area from this road. And so there were issues about traffic. They renegotiated the entry sections to their compound. But Marcus may be able to tell us how that project has developed. Then we were confronted with a Soho development along Northbourne Avenue. Nixon is just in the north here. That is supposed to be a multi-use complex, a commercial complex, but with the idea is a community available open spaces in the ground floor, which again, we had discussions with Sue Dyer was involved in that, about that development. At the face of it, it looks interesting, and I think it's even built out of wood rather than concrete. But the problem is that whether that space will be available to community is up to the people who then rent or lease that building, not up to the current developers. And there is also an issue, as you can see here with the shadow diagram, overshadowing the residential areas to the south. Then the latest thing is that Dame Patty Menzies' house had been sold, and now there are ideas how it wants to be redeveloped. In Dixon, these are the new buildings that have gone up. This is the bus exchange. For me, this is the ideal situation for supportive and social contact with Coles, asking what's happening with the future supermarket, where the last committee in Jane has been involved in negotiating a better design. They then, I think they lost 2 developers who were ready to do that. They are currently negotiating a new contract because they don't want to develop it themselves, Coles, but they need somebody else to take over, partly because it includes a residential section. So we need to wait for what's happening there. This is the design that included the ideas from NCCC. This is the old Woolworths. This is it's basically on the on-ground parking space between Dixon Library and Woolworth. And so the big concern was to have again contributions to the common goods from this development. And then the notorious Section 72, we had discussions with Common Ground, who will be, they are currently starting to build in this block 25. And we had then organized a meeting between the Section 72 team and Common Ground and NCCC and Angela was involved in that, to ask about the development of the rest of the status of the development of the rest of the Section 72. And a couple of interesting points here. One is that apparently this road, which was supposed to link through here, that is off the plans now. We were concerned about this basically through traffic and how it links up with the rest of the development and so on. So that road will not be a through road, we understand. The second interesting thing is that this Section 6 for the moment will be reserved as an area where the people who are developing the Coles development are putting and can park their gear. So at the moment, this section is reserved as a place where the building activities and the rest of Dixon's can keep their plants and so on. The big problem with this block 22 is that it belongs to the Salvation Army, and they are currently considering their portfolio. And I didn't get an answer from the Section 72 team whether they actually encourage Salvation Army to give up this site and so that it can be developed. And because we have a couple of and the Common Ground team is very supportive of that. We were talking about playgrounds for kids, and there is actually a group here that we should connect up with. It's called All Play in the North, who are concerned about playgrounds for children, including adventure playgrounds for all ages of children in North Canberra and the lack of it. And so here would be a chance to establish that, and Common Ground is very supportive. The other thing that Common Ground is supportive of is Angela's idea to have an urban farm here. So there are here are typical examples of common good issues that we need to push and keep an eye on in the development of that Section 72. And then there is Watson. North Watson is developing at an extremely fast rate. Here's the latest development. Dense residential housing and no community facilities whatsoever. Here's the next plot that's going to go. Here's the next plot that's going to go. A huge amount of residential development without any social, community, and other infrastructure. We need to keep an eye on this. And now the last few slides, and I just hammer them through because it's something I wanted to talk to you about for quite some time, and that is the topic of the misuse of land in the ICT. And the first slides are simply coloring in on-surface car park spaces in different Canberra places. Here is Civic. Here is Woden. Here is Belconnen. And here is a housing estate in Hackett. The red bits are parking. The cost of cars is tremendous. What about gardens? What about playgrounds? What about places for kids? No, it's for cars. And I think this is a very general issue we need to be addressing. And lastly, this is a picture of, this is the airport, this is Pialigo, and this is the most fertile soils in Canberra. Along the river, irrigation. What do we do with it? Lawn. We produce lawn, which will need more water, rather than making this the football of Canberra. That's what I call the misuse of land in the ACT. And I'd like for NCCC to pursue this a bit. Any questions? If not, then we need to now move to the election of office bearers. Simon. Oh, I forgot to say in Watson, summer nuts, I have not forgotten.
No, I wasn't going to mention summer nuts. I was just going to let the group know that Purdy Bowden, who's the co-founder of the playground people that you spoke about, is a Watson resident and is also one of the driving forces behind a microforest project also in Watson.
Bring her in.
Sorry?
Bring her in.
She's part of the WCA.
Good.
But she's got her plate a bit full at the moment with a 7-month-old and a 2-year-old and everything else she does. But yeah, she's good value.
Yeah.
We certainly have good connections with her.
Good. Any other comments? Brooke?
Yochin, have you by any chance spoken to Patrick Pentony about that most fertile part of Canberra?
No.
He ran in the ACT election for the Liberal Party.
Okay.
He's previously worked on, campaign for the Liberal Party in the last election as well. But his family have campaigned for decades for exactly what you're
really?
So
yeah.
His dad ran Glen. I think I can't pronounce the name of the farm, but the farm has been sold in the last few years. But the other son also was the founder with Patrick of Choco Baijo. So that's the family, and they've kind of had frustrated efforts to use that land out in Pielago and around the turf farm for urban farming or market gardening or something like that. So there have been efforts.
Yeah, no, it would be interesting to talk to him, who to talk to in the government about what the administrative and legal problems are that this is being misused for lawn, basically.
Yeah, Patrick would have some intel on that.
Yeah. Neil, thanks.
Just a comment on West Basin. I think it's pie in the sky to think that they're going to put a land bridge over Parks Way. It's just so expensive, especially having to dig the road out and drop it 2 meters, I believe, and with all the services that run under it as well. I just don't think that it'll be financially possible, but it's definitely worth pursuing if they're going to do it. But if they're just using it to sell the vision, I don't think we should accept it. The other one was to just follow up. You brushed over quickly and you said, I think, was it Chris or Bruce was going to talk about the building in Hague Park.
Yeah.
I'd like to know just a little bit more about that.
Okay, Chris wanted to talk about that. Do you want to do it now?
I can just give a quick update. So essentially, yeah, a resident got in touch and had received some information about a proposal that would be in Hague Park. Sorry, I don't know, have the my share screen up to show where it is on the map, but it'll be a 25-meter high building that would directly encroach on Hague Park.
25-meter high?
Yes, and I think the key point he made is that there's no road between the development and the park itself. So a lot of the existing developments have at least the distance of the width of the road between the buildings and the park.
It's actually 27.5 meters.
Oh, right, okay.
Mm.
And so there was the initial community consultation session that was held by phone only. So this was, I think, a JW Land development, Braddon Place. And I think, Jane, you also potentially you mentioned that you might have had a chance to talk to someone related to that project as well. I don't know if you want to.
It's actually in Hague Park.
No, it's on it's the public housing site immediately north.
North, okay.
Pointing onto Northbourne.
Yes, so I think I guess the key sort of point was that the consultation process has been, by phone. I think is not something I've heard of before, and the being sort of consultation, I think, with less than 20 people. So I think we're sort of wondering what the next step would be in terms of whether we would invite them to do a presentation to the NCCC, but also, just to try and get a handle on why the consultation's being conducted in that way to start with.
See, folks, I'm all for individual projects like that to be discussed in a Zoom meeting with the government and interested NCCC people. The problem we've had is that I organized a meeting like that, had people interested, and then nobody turned up. And so we need to be careful there. We need to make sure that people are really ready to then engage with government agencies. And I think that was the Hague Park community house development, as far as I remember. But then they sat there and nobody from NCCC turned up, and that's no good. We need to be careful there.
That would be quite embarrassing, I would think.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem, Joachim, was that they didn't use Zoom. They were using a different
the government is not allowed.
And when I tried to get it to work, it would not work on my system. So I fully intended to join that meeting, but the platform they were using, I just couldn't get to work.
So maybe because the government doesn't allow Zoom, which we are now familiar with, we may need to make sure that they allow us to test the system and give us some help how to make it work for interested parties before the meeting. Yeah. Okay. Bruce.
Yeah, could I?
Jochen, just a quick procedural thing. In addition to accepting the Treasurer's report and the Chair's report, we just need to agree the auditor for next year. I'd be proposing it be Peter Nolan again. We just need to have that done, that's all.
Yeah.
If people are agreeable to that.
Yeah.
Yes, I second that, Bruce.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Sorry, Angela.
Oh, that's all right. No, I was just going to say I also tried to dial into that meeting and yeah, couldn't get the system to work, but we used the WebEx with the Common Ground ones. That might be better. And also to let you know that I have been in touch with Purdy Bowden previously about the All Play Inner North, and and I've talked to her all about the urban farm, and she's supportive of that idea as well. So hopefully we could collaborate. But I think their first preference is other sites. Yeah. But it's worth having another conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think we should be very supportive of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm particularly interested in this because we have problems in the nature reserve with inappropriate use of the nature reserves, and it's completely clear that a lot of kids do not have the places to do rough play they need in our old suburbs, and so something needs to be done there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, folks. Anything else before election time? Good. Now, to really do this properly, we actually would need an independent person chairing the election.
Can I just ask, Joachim, is there more than one person contesting any particular position?
No, but we have two persons who would like to share one position.
That's interesting.
And I'm very supportive of that because it brings two very powerful people into the NCCC committee.
I'm talking about the office holders.
Yeah.
Not normal committee members.
I'm talking about the office holders.
Oh, okay. So which is the office that the two people want to share?
The deputy chair position.
Oh, okay.
Because I was completely, utterly unable as your reluctant chair to find a replacement of myself. And this is completely different to the problems the Americans have in the moment. I would like to go. Right, so we can make this very simple, but maybe slightly offbeat by simply going through the positions and making decisions. Is that okay with you, Neil?
Oh, so if you wanted someone to call for nominations, I'm happy to do it. If you're one of the people standing.
Okay, Neil.
I call for nominations for president of the
chair.
Chair. I nominate Joachim.
Thanks.
I second that.
Good.
Thanks, Bruce. Does anyone else wish to nominate? All right. Sorry?
Cowards.
All right. Since no one else has nominated, we've had one person. I say that Joachim's been appointed. So we're now calling nominations for Deputy Chair. I understand there are 2 people interested to share the position. They would be who?
Jane Goffman.
Jane, good work.
And Marianne.
Okay, good. Marianne Collis?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Well, we've got 2 people who've been nominated and wish to do it together. Do we have a seconder? Joachim, thank you. Anyone else wants to run for the position? No, I declare that those 2 people elected as Deputy Chair. Secretary, good work. I called for nominations for Secretary, position of Secretary.
I nominate Chris.
Chris, well done, Chris. Seconder, Joachim. Oh, sorry. I saw Bruce first. Thanks, Bruce. Any other nominations? No other nominations being received. I declare Chris duly elected as Secretary. I call for nominations for position of Treasurer.
So, Jochen, there was talk about someone else nominating. Has that happened?
We had a nomination, sort of nomination by Andrea Madden, but she didn't make completely clear to Chris that she would like to be treasurer, and she is not present. So I have no idea how to deal with this situation.
Well, we all had to have our nominations in 2 weeks before this meeting, as I understand. And if she didn't do that, well, then
and she's not present.
She can't be nominated.
Yeah.
So we already got nominations lodged.
Yeah, that was for deputy chair.
Okay.
And the other nominations were sort of informal.
All right. Okay.
Bruce, I think we can always decide later if you want to hand over to Andrea if she is seriously available. Would you be ready to continue as treasurer for the moment?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. I've got a nomination for Bruce as treasurer from Joachim. A seconder?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. So any other nominations? Doesn't sound like there will be. Okay, thank you. I declare Bruce elected as treasurer. Okay, so we now, the other positions, as I understand it, are normal committee members?
No. The last position of the officers is the media coordinator.
Sorry. Of course. I call for nominations for the NCCC media coordinator position.
Marcus, are you still awake?
He's muted. If he doesn't reply.
Yes, sorry, just a little bit of a problem there. Yes, I'm happy to continue as the media coordinator.
Thank you, Marcus. And a seconder?
Yes, I second Marcus.
Thank you. Right, any other nominations? No, I declare Marcus elected media coordinator. Well done.
Neil, thanks heaps for doing this.
That's right.
Successfully.
Avoiding
nominating yourself.
I'm
impresario of NCCC.
Oh, thank you.
I'll keep an eye on you.
Hell. Do you want nominations for committee members?
Well, Chris has received nominations for the resident associations, and maybe
we have to nominate those every
we only have to to basically take note of them. They nominate themselves, and we just need to chase down those who failed to have done that.
Okay, the Turner Resident Association nominates itself. But we also have to nominate appoint the auditor.
We've just done that.
Have we finished that? Okay.
We've just done that, and what we really appreciate about that auditor is that he is very reliable, quick, and has indicated that he would be ready to do it again for us.
Okay.
So this time he did it on short notice. No?
Jochen, do we need to appoint a public officer?
No, not anymore, somehow.
All right, okay.
Well, someone has to lodge the annual return.
I do that together with Bruce normally.
Okay, that's sensible.
Okay.
It's all done.
Right. Chris, you had a list of people who nominated for the resident associations. Do you have that?
Yes, that's right. So I'm happy to read out the nominations. So for the Lynham Residents Association, it was Gordon McAllister and Angela Reimer. For Campbell, I think it was Margaret Dudley and Margaret Henderson. For Watson, it was Simon Clark, who I think he's had to go, but is definitely nominated. Mm-hmm. And for Hackett, Brooke Clinton and Waltrid.
Okay.
And I think that leaves, so I think Jeff Davison previously represented Braddon. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just note the ones we need to chase up.
Yep. So Braddon, Downer, Reed, and Dixon.
Okay.
Turner would like to say.
Oh, sorry, Turner. Yep.
Yeah, I would like to represent Turner if I could.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks.
Perfect.
And on behalf of Dixon, we were going to continue with myself, Peter Callan, and Bruce Pink.
Mm-hmm. Right, folks. While you are still awake, and if you are interested, do you want to report from the resident associations?
I'm happy to.
Go, Jane.
Okay, so I don't have a massive amount. As a result of the Parliamentary and Governing Agreement, Dixon Residents Group has been concerned about the Garden City cycle route to make sure that NCCC's members and the council have real input into how that's designed, because at the moment the diagram that appears on map 2 of the City and Gateway framework, final version dated December 2018, is showing a route that in fact was the 1973 NCCC's sketch diagram. And a great deal has changed since 1973. And we want to make sure that the Garden City cycle route is actually safe and separated from vehicle traffic. So we've made contact with Pedal Power and putting together effectively a coordinating partnership with Pedal Power, which they seem interested in. So that's the first thing. But of course, there could well be quite a few other people in NCCC who are interested. I know Bruce has contacted and said he would be. So I think it could be useful to form an NCCC working party. So that would be the first thing I'd flag. Then my second thing was to mention that Section 72 is still very much a priority for the Dixon Residents Group. So that was going to be the other thing that we really prioritise resources to work on. We're also working on incorporating as a community association. That's going slower than I'd hoped, but we are getting there. So
James,
just quick.
before you move on, can you send this map or send us a link to this map?
Have I not done that yet? Have I not done that yet?
Maybe I missed that.
I'm happy to
go through, and I think your email is still in my inbox. I'll look at it if you
That's okay.
Put a link there.
It's actually quite interesting. Anyway, the okay. So just quickly, I've had no word whatsoever from Coles about the start of the project. So of course that's still very much up in the air. I would have thought, you know, securing a new developer, that they would have been very keen to do that. So a lot of time is slipping, and obviously those are holding costs for them. Unfortunately,
the lady, you gave me the contact, and I talked to her about maybe 10 days, a fortnight ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And she said she would. They think they have a settlement before Christmas, before the end of the year,
right?
And she would get back to us. So.
Yes, very interested to see where that goes.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, there's that new proposal for Dame Patty Menzies' house. I haven't had time yet to examine what they're showing for the plans. That website they've put together doesn't actually make it particularly easy to view any of that material, so that's just annoying. I've had no news back from the Heritage Council about the aerodrome nomination, but the next step in the process will be for the Heritage Council to carry out research and assessment. Now, obviously, the ground penetrating radar and the archaeologists would count as at least some of that research. However, there are the 2 lock spits that form part of the nomination, which they haven't yet investigated. The other things I would mention, you may be aware there was a DA to enlarge and extend the McDonald's in Dixon. That actually breached the terms of their lease, which has conditions about maximum gross floor area. It was nevertheless approved, which I find quite unusual. And after approval, a lease variation has been lodged. That's very much the cart before the horse. And if I were a lawyer, I would be quite concerned about due process. The ABC Radio today did quite a long piece in the afternoon from about 4:30 till 5 about Dixon Pool and the unofficial history of that, which they interviewed me for, and Chris Graham also spoke. And Chris mentioned a couple of things that I think could be of interest to others. He seemed to indicate that they may not be managing the pool for very much longer. So that's a big concern for everybody who believes that the pool has been exceptionally well managed for quite a long time now. And the second thing he mentioned, which I'm very supportive of, is a 25-metre indoor pool as an addition to the pool, which would require enlarging the footprint of the pool itself, as in that site would have to be enlarged in order to incorporate a 25-metre indoor pool.
Is there any chance to enlarge it? In which direction?
Well, you can either go north or east. You've got the car park, of course, to the east, which is public land. And you've got the area that I think is Block 13, Section 72 to the north.
As long as it doesn't impinge of the men's shed.
Indeed.
The men's shed needs to stay.
This is something that obviously directly involves Section 72 and the need for a comprehensive master plan. So that's something that comes back to the beginning. One more thing I wanted to mention. In the middle of the year, City Renewal announced, and I believe it was in the news, that SMEC and ACOM had been awarded a $13 million contract to work on Dixon and Braddon, and that community consultation would be part of that. However, here we are many months later, and we still haven't been contacted in any way. So I don't know whether they're actually doing any work or whether that's all been put on hold. But again, we have the problem that it appears they're not actually following through with consultation. And obviously we're concerned. Anyway, that's it for me for now. Thanks.
Jane, can you drill into the last issue a bit and see, just find out whom to talk to and ask what's happening?
Yes, I mean, the only way to do that obviously is to ring City Renewal and chase up who is actually meant to be carrying out the projects.
Okay.
So, I mean, but it's that thing again where here we are, we're the community, we're all volunteers, we're not being paid, and they're not doing their job.
Mm.
So we're ending up having to basically hold their hand and chase after them as if they were children.
Excuse me, I think the CRA website indicated that they would, you know, deliver something to the community to comment on by the end of this year. There was never any indication that there would be any consultation in the process leading up to some sort of formal documentation, and that's an issue as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Hi, Jochen.
Margaret.
Hi. Just an update from Campbell. We had our community meeting on the weekend, and one of the things that we're going to be putting forward a submission on to the National Capital Authority is on the works approval for 71 Constitution Avenue. That's the final of the 3 Hindmarsh buildings on Constitution Avenue. It's the 7th building in the, you know, Hindmarsh C5 development along Constitution Avenue and in that area along Anzac Parade in Campbell. The main concerns really relate to the residents of Getting Crescent. That's quite a narrow street. The proposal, which caught everybody by surprise, we knew there would be two-level townhouses along Getting Crescent, but now it's proposed to have, and depending on, you know, how you read the proposal, whether it's 13 or 12 3-level townhouses, which will really create a kind of wall along that basically, you know, small suburban, narrow suburban street. And it also, what it does in Campbell now, if you stand on the top of Cresswell Street, where once you used to look across to the vista of the Brindabellas, now all you see is this wall of 7 high-rise, or 6 at the moment. This will be the 7th high-rise building going in there. And it's what I call Campbell claustrophobia. It really, you know, the openness has now come down to just this wall of windows, basically. So the issues we'll be raising will be about the appropriateness of the 3 levels, but also to do with traffic and parking and the usual issues about where is the crane going to go in the construction, because it will have to swing over the other buildings and over the homes on Getting Crescent. So, so there are building safety issues and things like that. There on the DOMA site, I wrote to Minister Lay, and she sent a response saying that she'll consider the matter, but she wanted approval to give people's names to the DOMA consultants so that they could get back to us, and I haven't heard anything. So that was many months ago now. So anyway, they're the 2 main issues, apart from development fatigue and noise and everything.
Are you aware of any Aborigine heritage assessment there?
Marion was, and there are petroglyphs up on Mount Ainslie. It's well known that they're up on the mountain. That site is certainly, it's got an atmosphere to it, and you know, there are things around Campbell. There are scar trees. clearly in terms of the description of what the Ngambri people are talking about, where one would expect to have sites of significance to Aboriginal people and their culture, Campbell fits the bill. It was, it used to be, on the riverbank. It used to be looking over the river. There are also, the whole suburb is peppered with these really, really hard rocks.
No, it's more, is there an official attempt to...
The ANU is working, yeah.
Properly?
So some of the commentators in this issue, which the Ngambri people have gone to, have been the anthropologists at the ANU. So they're definitely getting some expert advice, as I understand it.
Okay.
Okay, that's it from me.
Thanks, Margaret.
I'll just give a brief update from Ainslie. We've just had the development application for the development on Rutherford Crescent released today. So I only just noticed that a few hours ago, so I'm just reading through that, and I'll likely put in a submission and circulate that round to committee members for the approval of the NCCC, if it's appropriate to put in a submission. I haven't actually read the development application yet. That's the main thing happening in Ainslie.
So is that the Ainslie Club thing? Or?
No, the Ainslie Club thing, that's been resolved. The Ainslie Football Club.
You're still standing.
What's that? Yeah.
Still alive.
Yes, yeah, that reached a settlement. I think I mentioned that at the last committee meeting. That reached a settlement, and I haven't heard anything since then. I mean, they did have were talking about plans for a 10-year development and residential development and all sorts of things that would require changes to the territory code. But that hasn't, I haven't heard anything since we reached our settlement. So maybe we just scared them off enough, or maybe they're rethinking their plans, or I don't know what's happening there. Yeah, they'll probably consult a lot more than they have previously, and pay a bit more.
It seems that the football club managers themselves were actually a bit pushed by whoever they employed to get this project done. I had the feeling they were quite apologetic about the whole approach they were pushed into by the guy they employed to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how it turned out, but I mean, there's a whole lot of area of land around that, the Ainslie Football Club, that, I mean, just looking at it, you can see is probably, most people would say is probably in some senses underutilized at the moment. And I don't know whether this is something the ACT government was supporting or developers were supporting, pushing for, but for whatever reason, they were started to put in place plans to develop the area around the oval, and ended up upsetting a lot of nearby residents. So
again, a beautiful example for why not talking to people about alternatives. What could we do here? And
well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I don't want to go into that all again. I've mentioned that a bit in previous meetings, but yeah, that reached a settlement, and so far I haven't heard anything further in relation to that. So I don't know if they're still planning on pursuing those ideas, or whether they're planning on taking a break for a few years. I imagine at some point they will come back and try to push forward some plans, because it's a area of land that's quite valuable, and yeah, as I said, probably underutilized.
Quite potential for interesting activities there.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of issues there with what it's currently zoned for and what it's meant to be used for and what it perhaps should be used for. But anyway, I mean, hopefully that'll be something that they discuss with nearby residents. So that's the Ainslie Football Club, but now my attention has shifted towards the Rutherford Crescent issue, which I spoke about at the committee meeting, where the YWCA is proposing to put supportive housing on an area of land that they own. And so yeah, I gave some details of that at the committee meeting, but yeah, I'd like to have a read of the DA in its entirety before I make too many more comments about that.
Anything else, folks? Then I declare this meeting ended.
I'd just like to thank Jochen for his great time over the last year and his continuation as well, and he's willing to continue as the chair of the NCCC. So thanks very much, Jochen.
Yes, I support
next year to find a replacement. No, look, I think we have a break now, and we'll meet again in February. But we can discuss issues always online, and if there are issues where we need to get together, we do that by Zoom on short notice, if that's okay with you guys. Stay safe, stay cool, stay away. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Was it?